Unfortunately, regulation has gone to an extent that directors are now spending more of their time on compliance. Now, is that a good thing? Personally, I believe directors should be spending more of their time planning, right? And then thinking about coming up with a vision of where the company will be going forward, trying to increase returns for their investors. But the current approach seems to be, well, you have to file this, you have to file that, you have to comply with this, you have to comply with that, and if you don't comply, we will then come after you. I think the regulators need to change that mindset, right? Corporate governance is not about compliance, right? It's not necessarily about filling in the forms. It's not necessarily checking the boxes. It's about, like I said, doing the right thing. Now, if you have directors spending all their time thinking about how to comply, then my question is this: where do they find the time to think about the next big thing? That's it. I think at the end of it, like I said, my definition of governance is basically doing the right thing. And doing the right thing is ethically driven. So all you have to do at the end of the day is to ask yourself, is that something that you would do? Or as I recall, my lecturers used to say, is this something that your mother will be happy, right, hearing about it in the evening news? And that's about it.
I think the regulation have a small role to play. At least it draws the framework for people to behave, because some people needs to be told what to do. But to have corporate governance to be working really properly, it has to come from the heart of people who realize what is ethical and what is not. And this is something that everyone learns as a child. It's not something that you learn about ethics when you're 55 years old. It's all about education. It should also come from the school, from the families, and so on. And if you're 45 and still don't know what is right and wrong, then I don't care about regulation. They will still behave in a reckless way. But regulation, of course, to some extent, at least tell people the rules of the games. And so one cannot ignore it. But one should not overplay it. In certain countries, I think they went too far extreme in enforcing rules, and not enforcing, but saying that rules becomes almost an impediment for economic growth or functioning of efficient function of a company.
If you have to be regulated and told exactly what to do, I think the game is already lost in many respects. Not to necessarily mention particular jurisdiction in this area. For example, we know some countries whereby you're not supposed to chew gum. And I mean, we've all been annoyed by stepping on chewing gum. But again, how can you really regulate these issues? I think people have to understand what are the consequences of one's behavior. And if you don't like it, then you should support any regulation that supports that. And just don't do it. If you think chewing gum is very annoying, then you shouldn't chew gum. If you think throwing rubbish on the street is annoying, then you should yourself not do it.
While it may be difficult to regulate for ethics, that does not necessarily mean that the whole question has to be left to personal discretion. Many companies have taken the initiative here and adopted codes of ethics or codes of conduct, which set out expected standards of behavior for employees. Such codes attempts to give guidelines on issues such as conflicts of interest and often encourage the reporting of any unlawful or unethical behavior. We have asked our guests for their views on the usefulness of adopting a code of conduct.
I think each one of us have our own code of ethics. That is something implanted with our own culture, with our own education, upbringing. But again, I think that is individual. But for a firm, for a company, a very important and explicit code of ethics is also very important. And that is one of the reasons I believe that why you're seeing that in the Sarbanes-Oxley rules, in the new Appendix 14 Hong Kong listing rules, they all specifically and explicitly talking about that all companies should have a well-documented and code of ethics which needs to be reviewed from time to time. And that particular code of ethics needs to be communicated well to the whole organization. A lot of training needs to be done because at the end of the day, the code of ethics and how the people works is actually what makes corporate governance working or not. I believe that we Chinese actually have a very strong cultural angle on all these ethical issues. The belief of what is right and what is wrong is very much indoctrinated in our own culture. And I don't believe that even with the economic development in our country, advancement of technology will change that heritage anyway. I think at the end of the day though, code of ethics, a lot of people know that the codes are there. Being able to enforce, it will have to be a check and balance between a person and its environment anyway. So what I meant is, sure that one's education and upbringing with the strong heritage of Chinese culture, that should enable someone to have a good, strong sense of what is right and what is wrong. But at the same time, that needs to be reinforced by market force, by regulations, to making sure that, or to doubly making sure that it works. And I believe that China is walking in the right direction. I'm quite optimistic on that. As I mentioned, in China Unicom, for example, we have a very explicit code of ethics. And that code of ethics have been communicated all throughout the organization. And we're making sure that twice a year, we review the code of ethics because there are other things happening. We need to enrich the code of ethics. And also that all employees are well trained in and knowing what this code of ethics is about as well.